13.56 million. That's how many units the Wii U sold in total, making it one of the worst selling home consoles in the history of Nintendo. In comparison, both its predecessor and successor managed to sell over 100 million units in the same time period, which made me wonder what would have actually happened if the Wii U had been a success as the Wii and Switch. That's why in this video we'll take a look at some possible scenarios of how Nintendo would have fared over the last few years and where they would be standing now if the Wii U had been a financial success and sold more units. So, let's go! What is up everybody, I'm Zaidu and I highly welcome you to this video. On this channel I talk a lot about Nintendo related stuff, so if you're interested, be sure to subscribe. For this video, I've put together 3 possible scenarios and I will discuss with you all how likely they were to happen if the Wii U had actually been a successful console. So now, let's start with option number 1. Nothing would have changed. But no, seriously, maybe the failure of the Wii U had no impact on anything at all and everything would be the same if the Wii U had been a success too, right? I mean, when the Switch came out, the Wii U was already 4.5 years old. Maybe the Wii U's lifespan was simply over and there wasn't much new content to look forward to anyway. Okay, who am I kidding? Honestly, this is the least likely option of the 3. If we take a closer look, on the one hand, the gap between the highly successful Wii and the failed Wii U was a near perfect 6 years, and now it's already been over 7 years since the Nintendo Switch came out and we still don't know how long it takes until the next console gets announced, so 4.5 years seems an extremely short lifespan for a Nintendo home console. And besides that, on the other hand, we also have to keep in mind that the Nintendo Switch was announced while there were still games planned for the Wii U. I've already talked about this in one of my previous videos, but you may know that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was actually planned as an exclusive Wii U game. The game was first announced in 2013, way before the Switch even existed, and 1 year later in 2014, when Nintendo finally showed us some gameplay, you can clearly see that the Wii U gamepad was in use as well, which also shows that Breath of the Wild was first supposed to be a Wii U game, which then got ported over to the Switch. Frankly, I highly doubt Nintendo would have done this if the Wii U had been as successful as, say, the Wii. And if you look at the games that were launched during the first months of the Switch, you might notice that there were only a few exclusive games. Many games were either Wii U ports such as Mario Kart 8 and Breath of the Wild, or sequels of successful Wii U games such as Splatoon. So that's why I think it's pretty obvious that the failure of the Wii U had a huge impact on the path that Nintendo eventually decided to take. But what about option number 2? The Switch would have never been a thing. If the Wii U had been as successful as the Switch, and many Switch games were also playable on the Wii U, maybe the Switch wouldn't have come out in the first place, right? I mean, it's pretty safe to say that among the best-selling games on the Nintendo Switch, there are quite some games that were originally planned for the Wii U, which is why it's possible that the Switch would have never been released if the Wii U had been a little more successful. Well, not really. Since the Wii U was released in 2012, in 2024 it will turn 12 years old, which already honestly makes me doubt that even if the Wii U would have been a successful console, there would be no new Nintendo console by now. As already mentioned, despite the Wii being among the most successful Nintendo consoles sales-wise, it took them only 6 years for the next home console to release, and therefore I think it's pretty unlikely that even if the Wii U would have been a massive financial success, we'd still stick in the Wii U era. Also, on top of that, we also have to consider that the Wii U was unfortunately not the most powerful console. Without going too much into detail, you can clearly see that the Wii U was less powerful than, say, the PS4 and Xbox One, even though they were all released at a similar time. In comparison, the Switch's performance is much better, its games have a higher resolution and a much more stable frame rate than the games on the Wii U. Even if the Switch is still not as powerful as the PS4, Nintendo's development is luckily going in the right direction, which is why I think the Switch's release was necessary for Nintendo to keep up with the quality standards, no matter how successful or not the Wii U was at its time. Therefore, I honestly believe that the Switch would have been released anyway, no matter how many units the Wii U sold. Maybe there wouldn't have been that many Wii U games ported over to it, but the Switch would be a thing nonetheless. Which already leads me to option number 3. The Switch would have been released later. If we consider the other 2 options and the previously mentioned points of this video, this one is the most likely option for me personally. Please, let me explain. First of all, and most importantly, if the Switch had been released a few years later, the Wii U's lifespan could have been easily extended by a few years, and the Switch wouldn't have been announced and released while there were still games planned for the Wii U. To me, honestly, it seems pretty unrealistic and strange that Nintendo would have kept the Wii U's lifespan just as short and announced the Switch while there were still games planned for the Wii U, considering the Wii U would have been just as successful as, say, the Wii. Also, on top of that, Nintendo would have had more time for making more original launch games for the Switch, such as Mario Kart 9 for example, which everyone was begging and waiting for back then, and in general, the Switch wouldn't have had that many Wii U ports. If I had to guess, I would say the Switch would have probably been released between 2018 and 2019, as then the Wii U would have had a lifespan lasting 6 to 7 years, which is a solid length for a Nintendo home console, and as already mentioned, Nintendo would have had enough time for making more original games for the Nintendo Switch instead of just porting over that many games one-to-one. The Switch was a pretty good step towards the future for Nintendo and the logical consequence of the Wii U, which is why I'm sure that it had to happen, but I think it wouldn't have hurt if it had been released maybe a year later and they would have taken the time to prepare its launch games better. But now, what do you think? Do you also think that the Switch would have been released even if the Wii U had been a success sales-wise? If so, when do you think would it have been released? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up and a subscription would be appreciated as well. Thanks for watching and see you the next time. Bye bye!